my talk today will focus on my view and how I actually tackle the theme of plant exploitation in prehistoric times. And I will start by actually describing you my methods, my proxies that I use. And after that, which will be probably a little bit boring, I will present you 2 case studies in which I had the opportunity to apply to the archaeological context these different workflows that I developed during my career so far. So as I said, I focus on plants, specifically plants and human interactions. And as we all know, actually, plants are a big part of our lifestyle nowadays, and of course have been a big part on the lifeways of our ancestors. Plants are part, first, of course, as we all know, of our subsistence. They play a major role in our subsistence, but they are also like a source of raw material for craft and technology. Let's think about basketry, untwinings, but also are part of the lifestyle. We can think about plant being used for medical purposes, etc. And in the archaeological record, we have different kinds of evidence that testify the importance that plants have played in our evolutionary path. For example, we have evidence coming from food remains for crust foods found on sites of different chronologies where we can identify remains of plants in the form of charred seeds, etc. We have evidence of basketry and matting and cordage dating back to the Middle Paleolithic, which tell us how much also plants were used as a raw material for craft activities. And also we have evidence coming from the microscopic analysis of plant microremains, which are usually now used to provide information related to plant processing and plant consumption. So the plant-human interaction has been one of the main topics in archaeology so far. It's decades and decades that researchers are questioning and trying to give answers to questions like the plant domestication, how plant domestication evolved, diffused, etc., etc. However, there are also other questions that we can actually, and in which me personally am very interested in, which relate to this big topic of human-plant interaction. For example, we could actually be interesting to know if there was whether there was a proper plant food technology in the sense of specific tools used for plant processing tasks even before plant domestication took its way, or also how the advent of plant domestication actually affected established plant food technology and dietary habits among, for example, hunter-gatherer groups. Also, how did the domestication of plants, so the introduction of domesticates, transformed or changed the some well-established patterns in the exploitation of wild plant species, which we know were exploited since the earliest phases of our history. Also, we would kind of be interested in if it's possible to trace differences or similarity in different plant food systems across the Neolithic of Southwest Asia and beyond. We am speaking about Southwest Asia and the Neolithic because it's my main topic of research at the moment. And also, if actually there were some specific plant food preferences among the early farming communities of the Neolithic in the Near East. And to actually address this question, we have different ways. And in my research, one of the main proxies that I use to tackle these questions and these themes is given by material culture, and specifically in the study of groundstone tools. Why groundstone tools? I mean, groundstone tools are considered some of the prime evidence to explore plant food processing among ancient communities. This is because this kind of study of these tools, both from a technological perspective and a functional perspective, give us information about the gestures that were performed in processing specific plants or to produce specific foods. Of course, they give us information about the kind of plants that were processed. We can gather information as well about the state of the materials that were processed using the tools. So if they were dry, if they were moistened, if they were charred or whatever. Also, an important aspect is the fact that groundstone tools are generally considered tools with long life history, so that they are characterized by different phases of use, which create we like to call it tool biography. And these phases are made of mise en forme, are made of use, reuse, rejuvenation, and a final discard. Discard, which not means specifically just throwing them away and not using them anymore. They actually kind of change their scope, and there are evidence showing that they are being used as architectural features. Like we found discarded groundstones used as elements of walls in houses in the Neolithic. Also, the spatial distribution of plants in a given context gave us an idea of the kind of activities that were performed and where these activities were performed. So are these activities related to domestic spaces? Were these activities related to more communal spaces? So they give us information related to how the processing of food, the preparation of foods also build the societies, the societies that we are studying. And overall, their study, merely from a morpho-technological point of view, give us information about the evolution and the existing of specific traits related to the plant food technologies. So how do I analyze this kind of tools, which can give us such a plethora of information? My study so far allowed me to blend and to put together both traditional and novel technique, specifically combining qualitative and quantitative methods in functional analysis. So the main pillars, if we want to call them like that, of my studies are experimental archaeology, is the analysis of usewear from a qualitative perspective using optical light microscopes at different magnifications, starting from low magnification up to high magnification, reaching 200 or 500 times. The analysis of residue, which is, when it's possible, often combined with the analysis of usewear, and the application of spatial analysis of, we like to call it micro-GIS, in the study of groundstone tool use related to the dispersion, the distribution of usewear traces as well as residues across the groundstone surfaces. And finally, this last part that I recently developed is the application of confocal microscopy and 3D surface texture analysis to actually gather high resolution quantitative data related on the use of these tools, as we will see later. So going through part of these aspects, experimental archaeology is the first thing, is the main part of my research, and I would like to stress it's maybe the most important one for really understanding how these tools have been used in the past. And this doesn't stand only for groundstone tools. It stands for napperstone tools, bone tools, and whatever tools we want to study the technology and use. So the design and performance of dedicated experiments allowed us to, first of all, have a direct experience in the use of these tools and in the processing of specific materials. Without that, we don't know if a certain shape, if a certain surface morphology actually is useful for the task we want to achieve. So actually, we really know directly how a tool actually works, if it works or if it doesn't work for a specific task. Then there is the observation of the modification that are generated by these experimental trials on the surface of our replicas, which allow us to build extensive reference collections encompassing both usewear and residues. And also, this specifically in the case for what concerns residues, it allows us sometimes to see if some specific patterns of damage, for example, in starch granules, that we can relate to specific kind of activities or processing of specific plants. And finally, the analysis of our experimental replicas using confocal microscopy allow us to statistically and quantitatively discriminate between plant species, discriminate between activity and different gestures that were applied in the processing of specific plants. And also, this is something that lately we are working on, try to give us some hints related to the intensity of use of specific tools. So here is a slide just to show you a bit what a reference collection looks like for what concerns usewear. We have the observation of the surface of the replicas at low magnification as well as at high magnifications. And this actually allows us to identify specific patterns, specifically in the morphological characteristic of these microtraces, which we call them microwear, that develop on the surface of the tools, which we can relate to specific activities, to a specific kind of plant. Indeed, we can by actually analyzing these patterns, we can achieve some information about the kinematics that were employed during a specific gesture, the type of worked material, of worked plant. In this case, if, for example, we are processing legumes, if we are processing cereals, if we are processing fruits, etc. And also they gave us information about the state of the worked material. This this kind of proxies actually allow us to, associated to specific kind of traces, allow us to provide really thorough functional interpretations. Then also there is a reference collections related to the plant microremains that we can actually observe and find across the used surface of the tools. And in this case, what we do is actually personally focused a lot on starch granules. So we built this collection, recording the specific characteristics of different morphotype of starch granules associated to specific plants, and we see if we find them in the specimens that we encounter in our analysis of the archaeological materials. And finally, the application, so the integration to all this set of qualitative analysis of quantitative methods, specifically of confocal microscopy and 3D surface texture analysis. Why we actually spend time trying to develop this workflow. I have to mention that this kind of technology, of equipment, of technique is not new, in a sense that it has been used for years now, and it's systematically used in the study of the function of harvesting tool, for example. The pioneer work by Juan José Ibáñez, from the Mille Fontanals Institute in Barcelona, actually opened the application of these techniques in the field for the first time. However, nobody, or not a lot of researchers, actually applied systematically this technique and tested this technique on the study of non-flaked tools, and so as groundstones are. Actually, what pushed me and my colleagues to try and test this kind of techniques? First is to develop a specific workflow and to see if this technique works as it works on napped tools, and specifically on harvesting tools, if this technique actually is successfully applicable to groundstone, to the analysis of use wear on groundstone tools. And then we tried to apply this technique because in the analysis, the functional analysis of groundstone tools, even if we create really detailed experimental reference collection from a qualitative perspective, so from the observation of the traces with optical light microscopes, and the I showed you before, the description of these characteristics of microwear, we cannot, at least me, I don't feel confident, and think all my colleagues working on groundstone tools cannot be so confident in associating a specific kind of wear pattern to a specific kind of plant. We can discriminate, we can distinguish between micropolish associated to legume or cereal or fruit processing, but we cannot say that if this specific micropolish is associated to a specific species of legume, a specific species of cereal, etc., etc. Because in most of the times, this kind of morphological characteristics of the micropolish are redundant. We found them across different species coming from the different plant family. So we cannot say this micropolish is related to chickpea, for example, or to barley. We cannot. It's really dangerous to say something like that, because we don't have the evidence supporting this. So why we try to apply this kind of quantitative method is because we would like to see if, from the analysis of the micro roughness of the micropolish, sorry for the micro, we are able to enhance the resolution of our interpretation, reaching like the species level of the plant that was worked. Then it allows us to generate quantitative data. What it means that for a discipline like use-wear analysis, which has often been criticized because of its subjectivity, because it's qualitative, it's difficult in a way to be repeatable, than the data shareable. I have my doubts in this, but okay, it has been a big issue. With the data generated by this kind of analysis, we can apply statistical tests to our data, and also we can grant the reproducibility and the objectivity of our observation. So actually, it gives us a plus in our interpretation. So this is as we did for the creation of our experimental reference collection of microwear, we did the same for a creation of an experimental quantitative dataset of 3D surface data. And this is just an example of how worked surface look under the confocal microscope, and it's from here that we extract specific parameters. So to show you how more or less it works, how the workflow that we developed, we actually acquire, using a confocal light microscope, 3D images of the used surface of the tools, then which are actually these ones. Then from this image here, we extract sub areas, generally 50 by 50 micrometers areas, And we process this data, which is actually the quantitative data that we have, using a metrological software, which is called Mountains Map by Digital Surf. And doing this, we extract and we measure ISO surface parameters used in for the analysis of surface texture, and we define some predictive algorithms that allow us, through quantitative discriminant analysis, to see if the specific kind of values of these surface parameters allow us to identify specific plants or specific gesture, etc., etc. And so far, we have thorough, comprehensive reference collections of replicas made of limestone and basalt. I focus on these kind of raw materials because are the most common materials in the context that I am studying. But we're speaking here with Yarda and Christina to enlarge this kind of analysis to other type of rocks, and to see if actually the method works to other kinds of types of rocks. And for now, actually, we have really good experimental results. Indeed, for what concerns limestone and basalt as well, we have an overall 79.9% of correct grouping of micro-associated to cereal or legumes. So if we actually ask to the software to say, can you tell me if this micropolish is associated to cereals or legumes or fruit or whatever, we have a really good 79.9% of correct identification. Then also we have for limestone and for basalt as well, a very high indices of correct grouping for what concerns different cereal grains. In limestone, we have like 82-83% of correct grouping, while with basalt we have a really nice 91.3% of surface correctly grouped. And finally, we have a little bit lower resolution or correctness in grouping for what relates to legumes, but is also good because we were speaking about more than 65% of correct grouping between the micropolishes associated to different legume species. So to answer the first question, can this technique enhance our resolution? Yes, it can. It can give us some ideas, some more information about the work at plants. So now, finally, finishing with the methodological part, we pass to the actual application of these techniques in two different archaeological scenarios. The first one relates to the exploitation of plant foods in the Mesolithic in the Danube gorges. And the second one that I will show you is the application of this technique to the functional analysis of groundstone tools coming from the Prepottery Neolithic site of Hawazin in Jordan. So starting with the analysis of these Mesolithic groundstone assemblages coming from the Danube gorges. The Danube gorges has been an incredibly important area of studies for the Mesolithic, and in the last 5 to 10 years, a lot of studies associated to the analysis of bioarchaeological and archaeological remains demonstrated the importance of plants within Mesolithic forages group of the region. However, even though we have a lot of materials stored in different museums related to groundstone tools or macrolithic tools, little is known about the technology associated to plant food processing, and also different aspects related to plant food processing strategies. So this is why actually we say, okay, let's analyze these tools and see if the data that we gather from the analysis of the tools actually is comparable and actually supports what we see from other proxies. So the study focused on the analysis of the groundstone assemblage from the Mesolithic site of Vlasats, which represents a key context for the study of the Mesolithic-Neolithic transition in southeastern Europe. The site is characterized by a very intense occupation going between the end of the 8th and the beginning of the 6th millennium calibrated BC. The overall material culture recovered at the site includes flake tools and abundant osseous artifacts and ornaments. We have a really important funerary evidence with more than 200 burials that have been excavated at the site. And finally, it yielded one of the richest late Mesolithic assemblages of non-flake tools. So the method that we applied for the study of the tools reflects more or less this overall will to blend together qualitative and quantitative analysis. And we actually also integrate this with the study of ancient human dental calculus. In this way, actually, we were able to gather both direct and indirect evidence related to the consumption and processing of plants. We provide reliable and detailed qualitative data on user and residues. We managed to gather some statistically testable data, which in turn ensures our the reproducibility of our results. So specifically, the qualitative analysis concerns the analysis of user and residues, which has been combined with the quantitative techniques, which are the analysis of surface morphometrics and spatial analysis of the used surface across the tools. As I said before, experimental archaeology played a major role in our study, so we built a very extensive user and residues reference collection related to the use of sandstone grindstone tools. And we processed both animal, plant, and mineral materials, reflecting what actually we know that could have been processed at the site at the time. So the non-flaked assemblage coming from Vlasats numbers more than 100 tools that we analyzed, and diagnostic traces in the sense of surface modification that we can actually consider reliable to investigate the use of the tools have been identified on 44 specimens within the assemblages. All the tools made of raw material coming from the Boeotenska River banks, and the tools are generally small and have or medium in size and have variable morphologies. We go from round to elongated, so that we don't have, like, let's say, standardized shapes. And in turn, for what concerns plant processing, we identified user and residues which we positively attributed to plant processing on 17 tools, which are the ones that you can see here, this table here. So each line represents a tool. What are the morphological, technomorphological characteristics of the tools that were used for plant processing at Vlasats? First of all, most of the tools are round or subangular in shape. These, the type of tools that we find include both active and passive tools. However, active tools are more abundant than passive ones. And this is something that we will discuss a little bit later. And what we observed on the tools that we can see also macroscopically is the presence of different kinds of surface modification. So we have surface leveling in most of the tools, but also we have the presence of often single or multiple pits on the tools, like this, that you can see here. So we have really like very flattened surfaces, but then we have also maybe on the other side or on the edges, some very punctual and extensive surface pitting, which is related to the use of the tools as well. Coming for the results. User and residues analysis actually performed by comparing what we see on the archaeological tools with what we developed experimentally allowed us to, first of all, define the type of gestures that were applied mostly more often with the tools, which are both back and forth gestures, as well as mixed gestures that we intend as gestures related to some transversal perpendicular motions, which can be associated to pounding, for example, and which sometimes are mixed with some back and forth motions as well. So it's like a combination of pounding and grinding if we want to speak about this specific type of activity. While the back and forth motions are mostly related to grinding. These back and forth motions are being associated mostly to the processing of grass grains. And this we know from the analysis of the micropolish that we identify. Plus, we have some more hints related to the residues, the starch granules that we identified on the tools, which are actually associated to plant species related to the Aegilops or Bromus, which are wild grasses that are actually present in the area and were present at the time. Whereas mixed pounding and grinding, mostly pounding activities, have been so far associated mostly for the processing of fruits. And which kind of fruits? Again, residues at this moment combined with what we saw experimentally and archaeologically through the analysis of useware, allow us to kind of restrict the species of fruit that could have been processed, which include Corylus, Cornus, and Quercus, so different kinds of fruits that were, again, present at the time and that have been possibly a source of food. Finally, the application of our quantitative data, let's say. So first of all, the spatial analysis of the used areas of the tools. What we saw from the application of microGIS is that most of the used areas on the tools are spatially located along the edges of the tools. And this, in turn, actually lead us to try to reconstruct the way in which these tools were handled and used. And we came through the reconstruction of the use of the tools with a certain amount of inclination, which means that the processing of the plant was not intensive in the sense that was really like carried out performing long back and forth movement or really extensive kind of movements. It was more a punctual kind of processing, which is very likely related to a more coarse grinding of the product. So the plants were most likely just processed with mixed like back and forth and circular motions, which produced like a floor that was not like the floor that we could have imagined produced by people in the Neolithic, for example. It was really like coarse, and the amount, probably the amount of work and material was really was not a lot. And this idea of the coarse grinding and working of the plant product is also supported by the finding in the dental calculus of a lot of grit, so of stone particles, which means that parts of the stone surface were grinded as well, and where the flour was not in a way cleaned or thoroughly processed. And actually we found some pieces of stones in the mouth of the individuals. Then the analysis of surface texture, which was made, I have to say now, not using a confocal microscope, but at a lower magnification using a digital stereo microscope. The process is actually the same. It's just that we have a larger surface area to analyze, but the surface parameters that we extracted are actually the same, and the workflow is the same. And we see that most of the surface data acquired from the tools at Vlasats is associated to experimental surface data related to vegetal material working. rather than animal or, of course, unused surfaces. So here you have the group of the surfaces that were used for animal material processing, and here you have the only surface that are related to natural sandstone, while here you have in red the surface that are related to vegetal material processing, and here in yellow all the data collected on the tools at Vlasats, and you see that they are very well associated. So what this means in conclusion, that our study so far tells us that wild grass grains and fruits were highly processed using groundstone tools at Vlasats. Groundstone tools, given the fact that we saw different patterns of modification, so as I showed you before, flattened areas and pitted surface, were involved in multiple tasks which are associated to dietary, but as well as non-dietary practices, and specifically in craft-related activities. Why we say this? Because this kind of pits that we saw on the tools at Vlasats are morphologically extremely similar to the pits that you produce through bipolar napping. And bipolar napping is one of the main techniques applied at the site. Unfortunately, we could not do a functional analysis of the intern of the pit because we have problems with concretion, which is really difficult to remove, and we cannot see actually the surface, and we cannot actually apply all our protocol. But just from the positioning and the shape of the pits, we see that both experimentally and from some reference in the literature that we have found that are available, we saw that these typical marks are very, very similar to the ones produced by the use of the tools as based as ampils, yes, to perform bipolar napping. Also, the analysis both of dental calculus and the useware tells us a bit of the rough processing of plants that was going on, so resulting in coarse-grained products. So not a fine grinding of the plant. In turn, this means that at Vlasats we have an emerging plant food technology, but we don't have still tools specifically used for plant working that we will see later in the Neolithic. But at the same time, our evidence demonstrates the really high familiarity of the groups at the sites and in the Danube Gorge region with various species of wild plants, which dates back at least to 9,500 years calibrated BC. So, moving to the southeast. Plant processing during the Prepottery Neolithic at Karesin. Karesin is a Prepottery Neolithic site located in the Zaka Valley, which is more or less 40 kilometers north of Amman. The site is very big and is located in natural terraces that were occupied since the 10th millennium BC. So here you see Karesin, here is the hill, and here are the different areas excavated at the site. And actually, all this is the site so far, and it's probably bigger. The occupation level at the site are associated to the late PPNA until the late PPNB, so are dated between 9,000 and 6,800 years calibrated BC. We have oval structures that are associated with the earlier occupation, so late PPNA occupations of the site. And then we have evidence of lime-plastered floors, which are documented both during the late PPNA and the early PPNB transition. And then we assist at a shift to square buildings, which are characteristic of the PPNB levels at the site. So here you have an example of the oval round structures of the late PPNA. And here you see that how the shape changes to more square than like angled designs. The archaeobotanical remains at the site. I have to thank this slide to Caroline Duché, who is the archaeobotanist taking care of the assemblage at the site. And the archaeobotanical assemblage is dominated by pulses, which include lentil, chickpea, grass pea, narbon vetch, and faba bean. Cereal grains are present, However, they are lower in frequency, and they are mostly dominated by barley. Here you see some examples of the charred remains that have been found by howling. The lithic assemblage at the site is characterized by tools produced by unidirectional napping, specifically during the PPNA level. We have early bidirectional napping recorded during the transitional late PPNA, early PPNB levels of the site, which is characterized by the production of Hell1 and Kian points, and the introduction of larger pointed tools. Bidirectional napping, which is mostly dominated by the presence of Jericho points, is very well attested during the middle PPNB. And finally, we have a very large and interesting assemblage of flint figurines that you can see here that are found as often associated to funerary context. We are now counting, this is an old picture from 2020, now we reached more than, I think, 50 flint figurines at the site. I have to say that flints are being studied. They are not used, so they are not tools. They are. We were thinking about tools or something. We don't find any kind of trace related to their use, so they are actually figurines. We would like to call them like that. Coming to what interests me more, the groundstone tool assemblage of the site. The raw materials mostly exploited include both basalt and the limestone. We have found numerous active and passive elements with high frequency of pestles. And there is a particular type of tool that has been found at Karesin, which are these grinding slabs characterized by a flat surface and single or multiple or sometimes triple cup holes found on their surfaces, which have been found inside the houses. You can see here, this is a wall, and this is one specimen that was found inside the house. These are limestone vessels that have been found, and these are the handstones, that grinders that we have found, really circular and well made. And here are some of the typical type of pestle that is found in the groundstone assemblage. So the groundstone tools, these, speaking a little bit more about this specific type of tools that are these slabs with single or multiple cup holes. These tools are found in situ only in the late PPNA transitional phases structures at the site. They're both made of basalt and limestone. We didn't see any kind of specific raw material pattern. And they have various shapes, which can be or circular or rectangular. Also here, we don't have any kind of specific pattern observed. We see on these tools, the most striking characteristic are these couples. The couples are, as I said, single, that they can range up to 3. Probably they are potentially, I put it in brackets because we still have to do an experiment to recreate these tools. They are produced through direct percussion using hard hammer stones. Why we say this? Because at the site, and specifically during this last season, we found a lot of flint cores bearing this kind of marks here, which here you cannot see it really well due to the illumination of the picture, but actually fit very well to produce this kind of couples. So it can be that some of the cores that we find that have this kind of marks, which are not related to napping, they are not napping mistakes because there is no angle, there is nothing, could be related to the production of these depressions on the tools. We know from the literature that to do this kind of couple is not difficult. In a sense, you don't necessitate of a lot of time. You just need to start doing a depression. Then the couple will develop through its use. Through its use until it becomes unusable. And we found here, it's not this, but we have a specimen with really deep couples, and you can see that if we test to put a pestle inside, it doesn't reach anymore at the bottom, so it's considered unused. And just next to it, we find another one that was made. So there are these kind of surface features are just shaped at the beginning and then are continuously produced through the use of the tools themselves. Also, here we used our reference collection of useware and residues, as I showed you before, that was used to interpret what we see on the, and we found across the tools. And coming through some of the results. First, we found 3 types so far of use-related modifications. A first one, which is associable to perpendicular and short longitudinal motions, which is mostly encountered on tools which yielded evidence of legume processing. Then we have a perpendicular and circular motions, which is exclusively associated to tools which have been used for legume processing. And finally, we have a user pattern related to ample back and forth motions, which we find exclusively associated to cereal grain processing, so to tools that were used for cereal grains. So overall, the user that we identified is associated both to the processing of legumes and cereal grains. We see that legume-related user is dominant. And as I said, we identified so far the study is still ongoing. We just studied a little part of the assemblage. It's huge. So these things will probably change. We can add other patterns and whatever. But for now, we identified just these 3 type of use patterns. And coming to the residues, we see that most of the granules that we identified include mostly members of the Fabaceae and Poaceae families. The morphotypes associated to the Fabaceae family include lentil, grass-pea, chickpea, fava bean, and vetch. And this we said it through our comparison with our reference collection. And the Poaceae members instead include members of the Triticeae and the Panicoidae tribes, so Triticum, Ordinum, and Panicum. And also here, we see a more dominant presence of granules of the Fabaceae family. Also, we identified some granule damage pattern which could be likely associated to the processing of the plants. Coming from to the application of our quantitative method, and specifically of confocal microscopy and 3D surface texture analysis, we saw that the majority of the 3D surface that we recorded are classified as surfaces which were involved in legume processing. When we go at this plant species level, we see that these legumes correspond to grass pea, fava bean, and chickpea. And we actually are very happy because these results align really well with the qualitative interpretation of the user observed on the tools. And also we see a consistency with the evidence coming from the archaeobotanical record. So everything so far seems to fit pretty well. So as a conclusions, we can say that at Kaizen, legumes played a major role in the dietary habits of the inhabitants at the sites. We actually, in this sense, we can tell that the people at Kaizen have a high agronomical knowledge. Why we say this? Because legumes are difficult to cultivate. They have specific characteristics that made their cultivation challenging. So they need to be really well known as a plant and as the plant in terms of its behavior. Also, this means that there's effort in processing and consuming legumes at Kaizen means that the people there really appreciate the nutritional values of this type of tools. We know that legumes are now considered superfoods. They are rich in proteins. They are amazing from a nutritional perspective. And also, we can see from the evidence so far, plus what we observed through the analysis of dental calculus, that this abundance of legumes might indicate some specifically culinary practices ongoing at the site. So another set of conclusions, mostly related to these special groundstones, is that we are looking at some task-specific groundstone tools. These tools have been used nearly exclusively from legumes. We have only one specimen which have yielded traces related to cereal processing, and this is confirmed both qualitative and quantitative. These tools are limited to the late PPNA and the transitional late PPNA, early PPNB period at the times. And it's very interesting because we found parallels of this kind of tools at different late PPNA sites across the Levant. So this tool is recurring. This shape is recurring. These flat slabs with couples are recurring and are found in other sites which are contemporary. So it means that maybe here we are speaking, if at plazas we cannot speak about plant-specific technology, here we have an evidence of task-specific tools. And finally, we identified specific gestures associated also to the processing of cereals and legumes, and the fact that plant processing activities were mostly taking place inside the domestic spaces, but we have also this evidence of possible communal places where the processing of legumes was going on. This is something that we excavate this year, and it's just these really big slabs that are really next to some structures at the site and have plenty of couples that, if we follow what we see from their portable counterpart, might be associated to the processing of pulses. And with this, I thank you for your attention.